Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Former Next Guys podcast. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you can support the show by going over to jcramergraphics.com and picking up an item. We also do discounts for group orders, so if you're looking, your unit, your business, whatever, is looking to do a large purchase, reach out and I'll send you a discount code. That allows you to also let everyone order individually. That way you're not stuck like collecting money, making rosters for sizes, colors, and all the other stuff. You know, that's the worst part about it. I remember doing it when I was in. Also, we offer free shipping on orders of $75 or more. And as always, if you're looking for a custom design for your unit, then reach out and we can facilitate that as well. So again, support the show. Go over to jcramergraphics.com and let's get to it. So we haven't officially started yet. I do want to officially start.
Let's do it. Start us.
The episode. So Dr. David Walton, I will use your correct title at the beginning here, Doctor. Yeah, Doctor of Education, correct?
That's right. Yeah, EDD and Ed Leadership with a concentration in curriculum design and development.
And you
full-blown nerd.
And you did that through the Army, right? When you were in Special Forces, they moved you over because they wanted to start an education like branch.
I did. I got put in charge. So first off, let's recognize who you're talking to here. I barely graduated college. My freshman year of college, I had a 1.6 GPA.
Oh man!
I mean, it's close to a failing out as you can get. And but by the grace of God, I stayed in. But on my last tour on active duty at the Special Warfare Center at Fort Bragg, I was put in charge of the RSOF education programs. And again, I'm an operations guy. I had no business being in charge of education. And the commanding general was like, you got to get smart on education. So I was like, okay. So I went and got my degree in education. Mm-hmm. So I happened to use a ton of it while I was on active duty. I was in the schoolhouse and we were doing, strategic planning and curriculum design and development. So I put it into practice right away. So it turned out to be not something that I knew that I had a propensity for or would enjoy, but it turned out that I used it on the job. And so, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. Good curriculum can really change a course, right? Like if it's mismanaged, if it's like you have one course in front of another, it sounds stupid. Like I know people that are listening to that may think that sounds stupid, but I remember we did a very deliberate method. I was on the 11th MU in 2014-15, and me and the air officer for my Anglicode detachment made like a very I don't know, it was very we made a curriculum for a JFO course, a Joint Fires Observer. So basically, for those that don't know what that is, that's bringing in people that are maybe untrained observers or they're trained in like artillery. And now we're going to teach them how to talk to aircraft, identify targets, read a map for working with aircraft. And, we had nothing to do. So we're like, hey, we normally teach this JFO course to our own guys and like other units that may request us, like division assets and stuff like that would request us to teach. So we're like, well, let's start a course on ship. And I remember, like, we were very deliberate about how we did it. It was like, hey, time me. Like, we made this PowerPoint. We were using the same PowerPoint that's been used forever. Let's go through and actually clean it up. Like, the slide that we'll eventually get to correct that spelling, or the one that doesn't, why is it in there? We'll take it out eventually. Like, let's go through and clean it up. And we cleaned it up. And I remember, like, hey, for each lesson, let's, like, run it with a stopwatch and get the actual time that we're giving the class. And then like arranging everything to work so that people can be on ship. And so it's like, that's at a micro level of the things that you probably learned in school, but it's right important.
I think of it as like storytelling. Like everyone knows a guy who can tell a good story, right? Tells a good war story. And it's a skill. Like it's a thing you got to learn how to do. So there's sort of two levels of that. There's a guy that has an interesting thing to say, and there's a guy that says it in an interesting way, right? So that's the instructor and the good curriculum. If you have a guy who can say things in an interesting way, and it is an interesting story, that's a winner, right? That's a Pulitzer Prize winning book or an Oscar Emmy winning film. So in the classroom, you want really good instructors and you want really good curriculum. And if you can get the two of those together, man, that's powerful. And we've all been there. We've all been in classes where we had a really good instructor and a really good curriculum. And you're like, man, it's like, it doesn't feel like learning. It's effortless. It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
So, and there's a science to it, right? Just like storytelling, there's an art to it. And curriculum is the same way. And there's classes, there's lesson plans, and then there's curriculum where you weave different classes together. And when it comes together, man, it's a thing of beauty. And to be be a benefactor of it, a victim of it, if it's bad, is painful. And if it's good, it's like, oh man, like I really enjoyed that program. I really learned a ton, and you don't even realize that you learned it. You were just in the room when it all happened. So yeah, so I got to do that, and it's almost my wife's a teacher, retired recently. My daughter's a teacher now, and like you see it when you teach an 8-year-old how to do math. That's like dark witchcraft. Like it's unbelievable. And so like at my level, at this graduate level, it's less impressive. When you learn how to teach a kid and teach them how to do like math. Oh my God, that is powerful stuff. So it's a real skill.
Yeah, putting it all together, it's important. I thought, like that's one of those moments when I was on ship again. That's like you got to make do with what you have. And we did like I was really proud of what we did, because we had the pilots on ship, we had artillery guys on ship. So when we had a specific portion that we were teaching or that we were practicing, like doing radio drills and stuff like that, we would bring down a Harrier pilot. We would bring up one of the FDC for the artillery so that they got practice, bust the rust a little bit. You're sitting on ship. There's nothing going on. It gets them to bust the rust a little bit, going through the comm procedures and stuff like that, and also enables us to teach these new guys on how to do these things if they were ever called upon. So I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a really successful thing. But you again, that's like at the very pointy end right there, where you're talking about courses for like selection, courses for the schoolhouse there, the Special Forces Warfare
Special
College?
Warfare Center and School. Yeah, Special Warfare Center and School.
Okay, yeah.
But what you're talking about, though, what you're describing, and you experienced it firsthand, so you'll be able to attest to this, is the skill set and the power of good teaching. And here's the reality. Here's the secret sauce: is that's what Green Berets are really supposed to do. They're supposed to be good teachers. Everyone thinks, the GWAT has totally muddied the true identity of what a Green Beret does. Mm-hmm. Green Berets are designed to do unconventional warfare. They're gonna take a small element. You're gonna be deployed behind enemy lines, and you're gonna link up with partisan forces, and you're gonna create a guerrilla fighting force. That's unconventional warfare. And in order to do that, you have to be a really skilled communicator and teacher. You're literally gonna be teaching classes in small unit tactics, advanced infantry stuff. Like, so if you're not a good teacher, you cannot be a good Green Beret. And the GWAT was at least what made it into the zeitgeist was direct action, flip down your nods and free fall out of the back of the aircraft and go do cool guy stuff. Man, that was like 4% of what we did. 96% was teaching, teaching and organizing. And that ain't sexy, man. That is boring. It doesn't look good on Instagram, but that's really what Green Berets do. And so you need a different kind of operator for that. You got to be a little bit more mature. You have to be an effective communicator. You have to have, an understanding of human dynamics. And you got to like I remember when I first showed up to my first ODA, and I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to be Green Beret. I'm going to do cool guy stuff.
I made it.
It was like, I made it. And it was like, hey, welcome to the team, Captain. You're going to review some POIs for the next, programs of instruction for the next 2 months. And I was like, hey, like, where's my weapon? They're like, here's your weapon. It's a pen and a computer. Get after it. So like, that's the reality. And there's real power in that. Like, that's what Green Berets do. Like, we're a force multiplier. If I could take 12 Green Berets and put them behind enemy lines and build a partisan force and an underground network and start get some guerrilla warfare going, I can take 12 guys and turn them into 500 fighters. That's powerful. Mm-hmm. 12 guys kicking in the doors is cool, but that's only 12 guys. If I can turn those 12 guys into 500, man, that's a force multiplier. That's a strategic asset. That is in the grand strategy. That's a force that has to be reckoned with. Like, so if you're Russia and China and you're our enemies, you have to reckon the fact that there are 12 guys here that can drop into your backyard, and in a few months we'll have a whole battalion working against you. One ODA. That's so you have to dedicate assets to that. You've got to have a plan to counter that. If there's one thing we've learned over the last 20 years, the GWAT, is that insurgencies are powerful. We damn near got our asses kicked in 2 countries because we couldn't do counterinsurgency very well. So I think we're sitting on the golden era on the edge of a golden era for Green Berets. The next 20 years are going to prove that Green Berets are the force of choice, unlike MARSOC, which we'll talk about in a little bit here.
Yeah, I was going to say there's been some mission creep, right, from other units. I mean, I was an advisor and, military advisor in Sangin in 2013 in Afghanistan. Yep. So I was the guy training and, went through like a 6-month advisor team like course that the
academy
the Marine Corps had set up. And the course was okay. I personally was disappointed. I mean, I was used to going to the field. I was a JTAC at the time too, right? And I had just become a JTAC. And I was expecting to do all this like fire support training to get ready to go to Afghanistan. And the advisors course didn't have any like specific advisor fire support guy training. And I was like, man, I spent 6 months of not dropping any bombs, not talking to any aircraft, and now I'm heading off to Afghanistan. And it was like, this is kind of crazy like that. And so for me, it was not as great. I guess for the actual advisor stuff, we did some language stuff and we did some different things. But anyways, what I'm getting at is the mission creep, right? Now, the Army has an advisor battalion, right? The SFAB or whatever they call it.
Yeah, the SFABs. Yeah, there's a couple of them. They're brigade level, and they're good. So let's frame this. There is way more advisory work than there are people to do the advising. So let's put it that way. And no one is in a better position to produce advisors than the U.S. We can lament all we want about the decline of the military and wokeism and the loss of lethality and all that business. And there's merit in that argument. We can talk about that. But our professional education system in the military, in particular for non-commissioned officers, produces unbelievably high quality leaders, teachers, coaches, mentors, the standard, NCO stuff, teach, coach, and mentor. So the U.S. is uniquely positioned to provide forces to do that. Even if they're not Green Berets or SFABs, you could probably cobble together a pretty good unit there. So what's also interesting about the advisor mission is that it is a low cost, high return on investment. You can take a couple dudes and send them out, and it doesn't have to be unconventional warfare. It can just be a JSET or a more traditional conventional advising mission like the ones that you participated in, and you get a pretty good return on investment. And so I don't think that there's a competition for that, and I think that's the future of warfare is small, specialized, surgical application of national military power for a larger return on investment. That's why SOF is so attractive. SOF is attractive in that way. Cyber is attractive in that way, and space is, while not inexpensive, is also attractive in that way. So the SOF cyber space triad is one that gets cited often. So advising and assisting like that, I think that's the wave of the future because you see such a large return on investment. So I don't get the sense that Special Forces sees that as a mission creep against us. But here's what's interesting though, is that we Green Berets have been doing that for so long that we almost have a corner on the market. SEALs don't want to do that mission. They're not designed for that mission. They don't assess and select for that mission. What do SEALs do? SEALs assess and select for a maritime direct action mission. That takes somebody who is hyper physically fit, a little bit aggressive, younger. We got to be a little bit more, physically resilient. So it skews towards young. And that is not the profile that fits well in the advise and assist, alone and unafraid. Oftentimes, I won't say unsupervised, but less supervised. You're given a commander's intent and an op fund and told to move out. So, you get sent to a valley, and you pick a stand, and you got to figure it out. So Green Berets are uniquely suited to do that. MARSOC is the interesting sort of in between, right? So MARSOC has a maritime component because they're Marines, and there's an amphibious component to that, and you're on boats, like as you said before, and so you're a natural fit for that. but you can't do what the SEALs do because that's a unique mission set. Okay. The SEALs can't do what the Green Berets do, but the Green Berets can't do what the SEAls do. You don't want to send an SFODA to go do an oil rig takedown or a ship underway assault. You can send SEALs to do that because they're specially trained for that. Okay, so I can't take SEALs and have them do what Green Berets do. I can't take Green Berets and have them do what SEALs do. So those are protected missions now, right? The Maritime Direct Action mission is protected for SEALs, and the Unconventional Warfare mission is protected for Green Berets. If such a thing existed, it doesn't. But let's just for conversation's sake. Okay, so where does MARSOC fit there? MARSOC's in the middle. They're a light reaction, direct action force, but not quite as good as SEALs. They can do advise and assist, but not quite as good as Green Berets. So what do they do? And so this is interesting. I talk with MARSOC fairly often, and I sit with the officers, and they graduate their version of the Q course, and they come in, and I sit with them, and I do a series of briefings with them. But one of the things that we talk about is MARSOC culture and what is the future of MARSOC. So I'll ask these young captains, right? These are the face men of the unit, fresh out of the schoolhouse, getting ready to go to their MSOTs, and I'll ask them what is MARSOC's mission, and they'll like good Marines do, they'll brace their backs and they'll say MARSOC conducts the full spectrum of joint special operations, blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, no, that's what everyone does. Like you could say the same thing of civil affairs, of PSYOPs. Like you're not telling me. And so we get down to we have this conversation: is what is MARSOC's unique market proposition? What can MARSOC do that only MARSOC can do? Only Green Berets can do UW. Only SEALs can do maritime direct action. What can MARSOC do? And they cannot answer that question. And it's like, ooh, so that's interesting, right? Okay, that's at the lowest tactical level. These guys haven't even been to a team yet, so maybe they're not representative of MARSOC. But now let's look at the highest levels of MARSOC. How does MARSOC, the command, think about MARSOC? And this is interesting. In September of this year, September of 24, so just a few months ago, MARSOC commander issued a what do they call it? A decision memorandum. A decision memorandum on boots. Okay, now bear with me here. Okay, we're making a massive leap here. MARSOC issued this decision memorandum on the use of non-standard boots, and they said something along the lines of the use of non-standard boots in MARSOC raiders detracts from the MARSOC mission, something blah blah blah. The real official, bureaucrats language here, and it was like, and they said, essentially, no more non-standard boots. It detracts from the mission. And I thought to myself, first off, if your mission is so impacted by non-standard boots, I would argue that your mission isn't very good. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's start there. But then the second thing that they said, and this is the most telling part, is they said that in essence, MARSOC raiders are not special. They just conduct special operations. And I was like, ooh, man, that is really...
That was from the command?
That's from the command. It's
wow.
A MARSOC... Here, I have in my notes here. MARSOC Decision Memorandum 24-12. And it literally said in there, MARSOC raiders are not special. They just conduct special operations. And I was like, oh, so let's think about that. Let's think about how that impacts.
What a recruiting line.
Right? like the entire, so here's the problem the Marines have. You can answer to this. You can speak for the Marine Corps here. Marines believe that every Marine is special. Therefore, no Marine can be more special than another Marine, right? Every Marine is elite. Therefore, nobody can be more elite than a Marine. Okay, so now you have a more elite force, MARSOC, inside of the Marine Corps, and this has been MARSOC's problem from the get-go, is because the Marine Corps ethos does not allow it, you cannot have special Marines. So it's like, okay, maybe there's some value in that. Maybe there's some value in everyone's elite. There's not, but let's assume there is. Yeah. So now let's look at how that gets applied, though. And you've had many Marine special operators on your podcast, and they've almost all universally echoed this: is that when you volunteer to become a CSO, to become a critical skills operator, you accept a tremendous amount of personal career risk. Number one, if you're in the fleet and you raise your hand and say, I want to go to MARSOC, your immediate chain of command immediately thinks two things. Number one, who does he think he is? Does he think he's better than us? So you're a little bit of a pariah. And number two, is he thinks that guy is not loyal to the Marine Corps. So immediately you're sort of put on an island. And I've heard this echoed by many Marines. You'd be amazed.
I know personally guys that have said the same thing, especially in the recon community. If you 100%. Want to go from like recon to another unit, and that's not just MARSOC, but to go and try out for other unit, they get that mentality like, who the fuck do you you're fucking cool, huh? And
you think you're better than us?
God forbid if you fail that course and come back, which all those courses have high failure rates. These are recon Marines that have gone through one of the probably the toughest selections in the military, but that doesn't mean they're going to pass the next selection. So yeah, you're right. I think depending on, and I hope that, that changes, but I don't think it will, because you're going to have certain personalities there. And, but yeah, that is true. I've heard that from multiple guys that were in recon specifically.
So now these guys are they get, and the way that you have made, the way that the Marine, I say you, like it's your fault. The way the Marines have set up the career pipeline is you only get one shot. You get one shot at A&S, one shot, and if you don't make it, like you said, you go back to the unit, and this is a unit who in their eyes, you just told them, "Fuck you, I'm better than you, and I'm out of here." And now you're back there. It's like, man, like you have burned. You just by raising your hand, you have by default burned all those bridges. Now you got to go back to that. So it's almost like it creates a toxic culture from the get. I mean, it's really, really bad. And I've had this discussion. So. One thing that SOCOM has not done is release what's called the IST data, the inter-service transfer data. And what inter-service transfer is Special Forces Assessment and Selection will take recruits from any branch, any service. There's a process you have to go through, and it's different for different branches. But I have every indication that we are seeing the largest IST movement in decades right now because of that, and specifically from Marines. And Marines have one of the highest selection rates because they know that they've got to make it or they're done. So when they come to SFAs, they do very, very well. They're higher even than guys coming from the Ranger Regiment. So it's a very strong population. And so we're getting, so hear me out. We're getting more Marines than ever, and they're doing very, very well. So it's like, I had a guy from 5th Group tell me that they have a company that's like a Marine company. It's like half of the dudes there used to be in the Marine
I've heard people say the hardest part about selection is your first 4 years in the Marine Corps. That's like a common phrase that I've heard people say.
Very true. So those guys are dying to get to leave because they know that if they don't make it, they're going back to their dead men walking. And if they do make it, they're going to be told by their own command. I have the memorandum right here that says you are not special. You only do special operations. It's like, so I've got diminished career opportunities if I'm a CSO. I've got I'm looked at by the big corps as a trader. Less than, and so like what's the payout to me? Why would I bother staying here?
Yeah,
it's going to be a big problem for the Marines in the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to manifest itself in big ways.
Well, I've seen, even while I was in, I knew a lot of guys that left like a lot of recon guys, and then guys from other communities that got out of the Marines and went over to become a Green Beret because they're like, even in recon, what's the mission? You're training, you're doing these hardcore training. I mean, they're some of these guys are elite shooters, elite at taking down, ships, oil and gas platforms, and they've proven it before. I remember there was a recon team that took down a ship during that whole Somali pirate, escapades. But the problem is that because they're not part of SOCOM, no one calls on them. They're on ship. I remember when I was on the Mew and we had, there was a ship that needed to be boarded. They they took the Navy boarding team over the recon Marines on our ship. I was like, that's fucked up, man. It was the Commodore's decision, but it's like, that's the thing. Like, because they're, and it's not because they're incapable. It's just they're not in the thought process of a lot of decision makers.
They don't have anybody advocating for them. It's and so that's the big point is they don't have anybody advocating for them. And MARSOC has gone so far as to not advocate for themselves. They are telling their own operators. So let's circle this whole thing around. They're telling their own operators, you are not special. You just get to do special operations. So, okay. Man, this is earth-shattering. So the Marine Corps ethos that will not allow MARSOC to exist. I mean, they've been fighting it since they were stood up. So let's say you say, okay, screw the Marine Corps. I'm going to MARSOC, and then the Brotherhood will take care of me. And then you get to MARSOC, and the MARSOC commander says, you ain't special. Matter of fact, you are a burden to the mission because you choose to wear non-standard boots.
How dare you? How dare
I could not like this. This is the when you join the service, you're a private and you worry about shining boots and cutting grass. But if you go 30 years later and you retire as a sergeant major and you worry about shining boots and cutting grass,
dude, that's the stuff that makes people want to get out. It's because it's like at some point treat me like a fucking adult. Hey, I want to buy these boots or these shoes because they work best for me. We all have different feet. The 3 options that the Marine Corps authorizes with an EGA stamped on the side, it doesn't work for me. Like, and you're out of everyone in the Marine Corps, technically you're with SOCOM, so it's different. It's supposed to be different. But out of everyone in the Marine Corps, you're the one that's most likely going to choose the best option for yourself because you're actually doing your job so much. You know, even if it's training and stuff, you're really working out your equipment. It's not like you go down to the issue facility and get your equipment and it goes in a storage locker and then 4 years later you turn it back in. You're one of those units that's actually out using all your equipment and stuff like that. So it makes sense for you to pick the best thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make sense for them.
Yeah, well, 100%. And while it's not stated openly, like there's no policy out there that says this, but one of the unspoken great benefits that guys love is when you come to special operations, you get to wear what you want and put your hands in your pockets.
Dude, hands in
right?
pockets
that's
all
just
day.
The reality of it, right? Non-standard units and all that stuff, right? So when this is particularly true for Green Berets, and I'll give you the great example, is that when you screw up, you get those special privileges taken away from you. And we've seen that. So the classic is the no hat, no salute area. In many soft footprints, in that battalion area, group area, it's a no hat, no salute. That's the little benefit you get for coming to the dark side, is you don't have to worry about where your patrol cap is and saluting everybody. And when third group, so about a year ago, third group had a big kerfuffle in the news where they had a couple of guys that were caught up in some drug trafficking and some human trafficking. It was pretty ugly. It was a pretty bad breakdown. It was very, very limited in the number of people that were actually involved in it. But the command came down hard on. I mean, they pulled in an entire. It was at least a company. It may have been the whole battalion. One morning, called them in on like a Saturday morning, gave everybody a urinalysis and read them the riot act and all that business. And it's still under investigation, still going through adjudication. It'll end up turning out to be probably 7 to 9 guys that are involved and it'll get punished, which is pretty small, not insignificant, but pretty small. But one of the things that they did to sort of like send a message was they revoked the no hat, no salute policy in the group area. And it was like, and that was the thing that got guys like riled up, like, this is some bullshit, man. And so little things like that, like we can joke about, oh, it's this stuff. Who cares? Don't wear it. Like, oh, I got it. Don't wear non-standard boots when you're around. But like, it's little stuff like that makes a difference. Like, that's the quality of life stuff. And it cascades down, and it makes a big deal. Treat guys like adults. You're seeing this in the big army too. There's been a recent sort of an epidemic of really bad chow in the dining facility. So the defects are, I always learn there are 3 things you don't mess with. You don't mess with Joe's pay, you don't mess with Joe's mail, and you don't mess with Joe's chow. Those 3 things are written in stone. You get 3 hots and a cot, and you get your mail when mail call comes. And the dining facilities, particularly at places like Fort Carson out in Colorado, are really poorly run. And if you talk to the logisticians, there's all sorts of reasons why. There's a standard 21-day menu, and there's supply chains and blah, 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 blah. And there's not enough cooks in the service, and you got to contract it out and all that business. But like, you are fucking with Joe's Chow, and you will not see guys complain as much as they do when they can't go to the dining facility and get a decent damn meal. So one of the big things for coming to special operations is our DFACs are like legit good. Like, people care, they take care of you, you get good chow. And so I liken the we're taking away your right to wear boots, and we're going to take away your right to no hat, no salute to the way the big army looks at dining facilities. You start messing with stuff like that, and you're going to see a massive impact. So my advice to the new administration, we got a new administration. Now, this is good. Congratulations to the Marine Corps. You have a Marine Corps E4 who's going to be the vice president, right? Man, you guys are doing well. Maybe he'll fix the defects. But can you imagine the return on investment for that? Minor in terms of what it would cost, and the morale would immediately go up, right? Immediately, you'd see that would impact recruiting across the force. So let guys wear the boots they want, feed them well, and give them, to your point, give them a mission, give them a good mission, and then have the services advocate for that. Don't have me doing gate guard, don't have me mowing lawns. Let me do my mission, whatever that mission is. If I'm a field artilleryman, let me shoot the big guns. If I'm an aviator, let me fly the aircraft. If I'm a Green Beret, let me go do the things that Green Berets do. If I'm a MARSOC Raider, let me go do what MARSOC is good at. But MARSOC, because they're entrenched in this Marine culture, cannot figure out what their unique market proposition is. And so I always challenge these young captains when I'm speaking with them is, you guys got to set the culture. The culture of what MARSOC is going to do cannot be driven from the command down. You got to set what that culture is. You guys decide what it is you're going to be good at and just do it. And we'll see if that happens. But that's critical to the future of MARSOC. Maybe it's the advisory role. Maybe they do the maritime advisory roles that the SEALs are not meant for. Because MARSOC, like Green Berets, you can't go till you're a little bit older, a little bit more mature. You got to be a little bit more seasoned.
Yeah, I think you can't even apply until you're a senior corporal or a sergeant. Yeah. So E4 or E5.
Yeah, it usually equates about 4 years in, something like that.
And if you're like a staff sergeant, an E6, I think they will only take you if you've been a staff sergeant for like a year or less or something like that. Because I remember...
Yeah, it's a real tight window.
I remember some recon guys that wanted to go over, but they had missed the boat because they were like, oh, I'm a staff sergeant and I've been in for like 6 years or something like that, and I missed it. And I'm like... Yeah. That's so stupid. Like, you guys are the force recon guys that have been out training.
Prime guys, yeah.
Yeah, you have a lot of the skills that they need already checked off. You know, you don't even have to send you to so many schools at the end because you've already done it. You know,
you're gonna get a much higher return on investment. So I think MARSOC's at an inflection point here. They've probably got. I mean, if the Marines had their way, the Marines would shit can the whole thing. That's some prime real estate out there, Stony Point on Lejeune. And you lose your best. It's a commitment from the service. You lose some of your best guys when you have these saltiness. That's the reality of it. But you also you get guys into the service because they want to achieve that, right? I mean, that's the secret. The 18 X-ray program is the greatest recruiting pipeline for the 82nd Airborne ever, because 2/3 of the guys that fail, they go down the road to the 82nd. So
that's the same with the SEALs. That's the same with the SEALs direct. That's why people don't understand. They're like, why would they let so-and-so sign up with a SEAL contract? It's like, they know he's not going to be a SEAL. He's going to go be a bosun's mate, or he's going to go be a corpsman or something. One of these other jobs that need to be filled that we're not recruiting people for. That's the secret. Like, once you fail, now it's up to them to decide where you go. That's hilarious. I think the total SEAL, the aggregate SEAL selection rate's 10%. It's pretty bad. So Marines, I think, are about
50% from A&S. I don't know what the total pipeline is, but I think it's about 50% at A&S. Green Berets are about historically 36%. Yeah.
I'd be surprised to know that it was at 50%. If it is, it wasn't always like that. That may be an attribution to, because part of that is probably because I know before I got out, they instituted a pre-ANS program. So to kind of weed guys out before they even went to ANS. That way we're not spending all this time and money to find out that you can't swim, or that you can't ruck more than 2 miles or something like that. That way they do that.
So it's the same way for 18 X-rays. So for 18 X-rays, that's the special forces from street to seat into the pipeline. And the numbers for 18 X-ray candidates at selection at SFAS is about 40%, which is pretty good. So officers are about 50% selection rate. National Guard is at about 45%. 18 X-rays are at about 40%, and then active duty enlisted in-service recruits are at about 25%. So do the math there. So everyone goes, "Oh man, 18 X-ray, you got a pretty good shot there. 40%, that's good." But that only counts at selection. That doesn't count the guys that signed an 18 X-ray contract and lost it while they were in basic training. That's a not insignificant number. It's very, very large.
Oh, they lose it at basic?
At basic. So one of the things you have to do in order to keep your 18 X-ray contract is pass a PT test at a specific level in basic training during OSA down at Fort Moore. And quite a few guys do not pass that, and they lose their contract. Then guys will go to airborne school, get injured, can't pass, or will quit. Then guys, now you whittle the number down even more. Guys show up here to Fort Liberty, and they're assigned to SWCC, and they have to go through the special SFPC, Special Forces Preparatory Course. And that's you'll lose even more guys there. So it looks like you get 40% of the guys through. You only get through 40% of the guys that got to selection. The real number is probably half of that. It's probably half that.
Yeah.
So now it doesn't look quite so good. And the same thing with the National Guard. A lot of guys will say, well, if National Guard numbers historically are about 45%, then my best chance is to go through the National Guard. Well, yes, but the National Guard groups run what's called SFRE, Special Forces Readiness Exercise. So there's an SFRE and then an SFCP, a conditioning program. So these are like mini selection gates that they have to pass to before the National Guard will send them to selection. And it's very, very some units are better run than others, but like Florida 319, they run a phenomenal prep program down there. And they if you get through their prep program to go to selection, they have a really high selection rate. But because a lot of guys didn't pass any of the gates to get there, so the numbers are a little bit skewed that way. Whereas the SEALs count, or the reason the SEALs are at 10% is because they count numbers from the get-go. So here's an interesting one for you. So one of the projects I'm working on now is a Ranger Regiment Assessment and Selection Program, prep program. So it's called RASP. RASP is, if you want to go to the Ranger Regiment, you have to go through their selection. It's called RASP. And that's called an Option 40 contract. If you're a young 11 X-ray infantryman and you want to go to the Ranger Regiment, you sign what's called an Option 40 contract. And that essentially guarantees you a shot to go to RASP. And the total number of RASP guys that actually end up in a Ranger battalion is 8%. So their selection rate at RASP is about 50% right now. But the total number of guys that sign an Option 40 contract, so start basic training and then all the way through the various gates and end up in a Ranger battalion, is 8%. So if you were a recruiter and you telling a kid, hey, you want an Option 40 contract? Hell yeah, brother, you can make it. You can go right to the Ranger Regiment. Your tan beret is waiting for you. And then if you told him your chances of making it are 8%, he'd be like, fuck that. I want to go to the 82nd. So that's brutal. So one of the things that the demand signals I've received is there's kids that are like, help me prep. How do I get ready for this unique process? And the reality of it is the hard part is not RASP, and RASP is hard. That the weeks out there at Cole Range are brutal. I mean, it's a smoke session. But it's the harder part is maintaining that option 40 contract all the way through basic and AIT and all that. And that's all option 40s. That's not just 11 series guys. That's, they take a bunch of different MOSs, any MOS in the Ranger Regiment, cooks and supply guys and all that business. So those are pretty abysmal numbers. And so I got guys asking me, hey man, you got to help me prep. How do I do this? So we can do that. That's easy. That's just physical, that's exercise science. That's physical prep and conditioning.
Yeah.
Pretty easy. But if you don't know, you don't know. And so that demand has been huge. I've been telling guys recently, so I have a team of strength and conditioning coaches and exercise physiologists and physical therapists. And we're working on the correct model formula for RASP, the same way that we did for SFAS when we wrote Shut Up and Ruck, which is the SF prep manual that we came up with. That's been really, really popular. And the feedback from guys that are on it, man, is the performance gains are phenomenal. And guys are asking, hey, I want one for RASP. And it's like, okay, but we have to do it right. So that's a year-long research, in-depth research process. We've just been telling guys do Shut Up and Ruck in the meantime. But we got to get those numbers up because 8% is not going to cut it. So
yeah, that's pretty low. I mean, people don't want to hear. There's two thoughts, right? If you increase the numbers, then are you letting in people that shouldn't be there? Or are we increasing the numbers because people are coming in more understanding of what they're about to do and have prepped properly?
Yeah, and so that's a great point, Justin. So there has never been more information available to a young candidate for any of the pipelines, whether it's MARSOC or SEALs, whatever.
Yeah.
There is no lack of information. I've written a book on it. There's literally a book called Ruck Up or Shut Up that you can buy, and it will tell you exactly what to expect of selection. It won't tell you the standards, but it'll give you everything. You probably got a copy on your shelf.
Yeah, I got it up on the shelf right there.
There you go. So it's available. There's multiple YouTube channels. I mean, the SWIC social media is packed with nuggets of information. That information is out there. So it's not a lack of information. And we know the exercise science. We know how to prep guys. We know how to build endurance programs and strength programs, how to keep guys injury free. That's not a problem. I think there's probably maybe too much information. Guys get a little paralysis by analysis. I think what we have to recognize is that we have a different recruiting population. These kids are just different. They are less physical by nature. So we know that the three sports that are decreasing in popularity or in participation the most are football, lacrosse, and wrestling. Name for me three sports that are better for preparing a guy to have his ass handed to him in an assessment selection program. Football is essentially learning how to bully other people and learning how to be bullied. Lacrosse, the same way. Brutal contact sport. Wrestling, you're going to beat a man into submission on a wrestling mat. Okay, those are three sports that you will uniquely prepare a guy for the rigors of a physical, demanding commando lifestyle. Those are the three sports that are declining in participation the most. So we have a different recruiting population. Look at the information environment that young recruits come into. Where we have social media profiles that are uniquely curated, and I put out into the world as a young high school kid, what I put out into the world on my social media is only what I want you to see. It's only the best elements of me. And the feedback that I get from that is immediate and positive. I get likes and way to go and follows and all that business. And now compare that to your experience as a young private going through the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, and none of it was positive feedback.
No.
And if you got feedback at all, you didn't control any of that environment. You were in zero control, and so you are by default our recruiting population. This is not an attractive lifestyle, and the military is not an attractive lifestyle. So it used to be that the return on that was that you got to be part of the brotherhood, the military elite. You were treated with a little more deference and respect. Thank you for your service. For as cringy as that may be for some guys, but that's what you bought into, right? You also got some benefits. You got some of the GI Bill and you got taken care of. You had 3 hots and a cot. So now take these young recruits and these guys that have grown up in this environment, this information environment, and the physical environment, plus 70% of young boys are raised in homes without fathers. That's pretty bad. You're in an education system where 84% of teachers are female, so you have no positive male influence. Man, you have created a shitstorm of horrible conditions that the military used to be able to say, come into this brotherhood and you'll get all these benefits. And now it is less so. I'm not going to say it is not that way, but it is less so. It's toxic masculinity. It's now you can't even get 3 hots and a cot because the barracks have mold in it, and if you're at 29 Palms, God help you, there's no AC in the barracks. You live in the fucking desert and there's no air conditioning. So and now you're going to mess around with my food in the DFAC, and that's a less attractive thing now, right?
Yeah.
What we saw in the last election, I think, was a response to that. You saw young males were like, enough of that woke business. I want to be engaged in an environment where I'm at least not punished for wanting to serve,
mm-hmm.
or for being masculine, or for being for lack of a better term, a dude guy, bro, right? So you saw that in this last election. That's why I think that we're on the cusp of a very good couple recruiting years. I don't think recruiters going to have any trouble making mission, because I think you're going to see guys coming back to that. It is you. I don't think you can place enough importance on the fact that JD Vance got elected vice president. He is by the way, you could be JD Vance's stunt double. JD Vance.
Yeah, right.
JD Vance is a hard scrabble, came from Appalachia. He's got a great story. Young Marine, on the junior enlisted Marine, and now he's the vice president of the United States. Like that story is going to resonate with the young male population more than we can imagine. The acquittal of Daniel Penny in New York, I don't think we can understate how important that is. That's sort of a statement to say that masculinity is back. Young Marines are back. We're back in favor. And I think that's gonna contribute to the overall information environment. And I think you're going to see the military in general, and particularly the traditionally masculine roles, Marine infantrymen, Marine ground combat, special operations. I think you're going to see a significant resurgence there. We got to wait a couple years for that to play out, but I think it's going to be marked.
No, I think you're right. I think right now, I think out of the most recent year, the Marine Corps is the one that had the least issues with getting recruiting. I think they met all their goals that they had set out. I don't know if those goals were lowered before they set them from the previous year.
I think you're the only service that didn't. And if you remember, I don't know if you saw it or not, but they had all the senior listed leaders from each of the services. Each of the service chiefs were testifying in front of Congress. And it was, they're impressive, good public speakers. But man, that Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps was in there. Brother, I wanted to go head down to the recruiters and list. When he got done talking, I mean, he is cut from the cloth of the most, like you called central casting and said, get me the most badass E9 you can possibly find and put him in front of Congress. And it was like, he was talking and we're not lowering standards. We refuse. And I was like, man, boy, you guys picked a good one here. And he said it very clearly. Marine Corps is not lowering its standards, and we have no trouble meeting our mission. And they're the only service that didn't lower their quota. And
I think that's because people want a challenge. People are tired of the 100%. Participation trophies and stuff like that. Like it's the Marine Corps is still. I'm not saying that they're not softer. Obviously, a softer generation than mine. We were obviously
way softer than when you came.
We were obviously.
I
went to the last hard boot camp, right? Yeah. But I think they offer a challenge, and that's what a lot of like kids, I'll call them kids, 18 to 22-year-olds that are joining the military, a lot of them want a challenge. Some of them do want to come in for benefits and stuff like that. But if you're joining the Marine Corps specifically, you want to be a Marine. Like it's not,
Yep.
if you want the benefits and stuff like that, you can do that without the pain of becoming a Marine, going through boot camp and stuff like that. And people know that, but I think that challenge to say, hey man, I went through Paris Island, or I went through San Diego and became a Marine. That's huge for a lot of people. And that's like its own selling point. And that's like why the Marine Corps throughout history has been super basic on their advertising, because it works. It's like, hey, we didn't promise you a rose garden kind of mentality, but it does trickle over to what you were talking about earlier about like there's no special Marines because, hey, we all went through this, everyone's special. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Okay, whatever. But I do think having that drive, and, part of it also is that there's a lot of like heritage pages on like Instagram and social media that really kind of push out not just the Marine Corps but the military in general, and show different aspects of it and what it's really like. I mention them all the time on here. Goons Up is one of them. Heavily Suppressed is another one. That's a good one if you want to know anything about artillery and that kind of world. There's these pages that you can go and find out information and see what they're actually doing in training, and it makes training look cool too. It's like, oh, and you see the brotherhood.
Is cool. That's why you wanted to join. You wanted to shoot the big guns, and get scuffed up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it really shows like the brotherhood too, because there's people in the comments like, yeah, I remember when we were on that range, and like, you see that kind of deal. So I think that helps recruiting. I talked to a general, and he was saying that one thing that people don't ever bring up about the recruiting and why it's such an issue is that not only is it less attractive to a lot of the youth of America, but also that this new generation that they're recruiting is half the size as the millennial generation, which was half the size of their parents' generation. So they're that's the thing, is the dwindling pool is part of it, is like there's just not as many people.
So there's a couple issues there. 77% of Americans are ineligible to serve in the military. MHS Genesis is a big part of that, right? That's the new medical screening system.
Yeah, you can't lie about medical stuff anymore.
All your records are there, laid bare, right? So it used to be just a few years ago when MH Genesis first came out. ADHD is the big one, right? ADHD and any sort of mental health history, including an IEP, an individualized education plan. That's considered a mental health intervention. So it used to be that when MHS Genesis first came out, the rule was you had to have 7 years of a clean diagnosis from any ADHD and any medications. Well, so if you're a high school kid and that your parents have you on the meds, because that's the default position now in schools, is that you're not eligible until you're 25 years old.
Wow, I didn't know that. 7 years, huh?
7 years. That's what it was initially, So recruiters were like, "Holy shit, man! Like you've killed us. We're not. There's no way we're going to make mission. These kids are off. They're off the market." So they relooked that. They reconsidered that guidance, and it went down to 2 years. And I think now it's down to 1 year. You have to have 1 year clean from meds with a clean diagnosis from a licensed mental health professional. So 7 years down to 1 year, that is not insignificant. So there's a recognition there, but also kids are fatter. Because they're growing up more kids are growing up in fatherless homes. They're less likely to have a legal intervention somewhere. They got a record now, right? So you're too fat, too dumb, or too sick to be eligible. So the pool is much smaller. So and all the services are compete for the same people. Everyone wants smart, fit, young, motivated, without any mental health issues, and that pool is very, very small. Now take that, make that down even smaller into the soft community, and in soft, I think it's something like 60% of guys from in service are ineligible to come to special forces. So I mean, your pool is like infinitesimally small, and we're seeing those rates play out at SFAS. We are the historical selection rate is 36%. And we, for the last couple of years, have been hovering around 20%. And we had a class in August of this year that was selected at 10%. 10%. So almost a quarter of what the historical average is. That's of course unsustainable. That you get 10% selection rates for special mission units. That is not one that you get for special forces. It's unsustainable. We missed our accession goal by 50% the last 3 years, and getting worse every year. So eventually you're going to have to shut down special forces groups, and of course we're not willing to do that. So I'm sort of two minds here. I take great pride in the fact that we have not lowered the standards of selection. But I also recognize that that's unsustainable. Something has to be done. And if we're not going to change our selection standards, and we should not as the same way that the Marine Corps has not lowered their standards, the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps is very clear on that. We ain't lowering standards. I think that's awesome. There's an attractiveness to that. Guys are like, I want that challenge. So then we have to the only other thing you can do is since you're not going to change the accessions process, you then have to change those that are being assessed. You have to get to them earlier, get them more physically prepared, get them off the drugs, get them out of legal trouble. Mm-hmm. You have to have sort of an outreach program down to the recruiting population and say, if you want this lifestyle, if you want to test yourself, count yourself, you want to be in the Brotherhood, you want to count yourself amongst the best, whether that's the Marine Corps or Cyber Command. Those are the two ends of the spectrum there, right? Marine Corps or Cyber Command, crayon eater or a guy that does crayon graphic arts. Huh. You have to get to that population younger, sooner, and intervene in the positive sense to get them healthy, get them physically fit, keep them out of legal trouble. So that requires a concerted effort of outreach down to those people to tell them this is what's waiting for you. When you're 14 or 13, the last thing on your mind is going through MEPS in 5 years. Mm-hmm. That's just not there. But for many of them, that's where those problems start. So you've got to have an intervention there. The number one way you could do that is to keep fathers in the home. That would solve you probably half the problems right there. You probably got to get a better education system. We know that the modern American education system is designed to produce reasonably smart graduates that are able to fill the industrial base. This is well documented. People act surprised when they hear this. The modern American education system is the experiment. It is not the norm, and it was designed to produce a reasonably educated population to man the industrial base. And the entire apparatus has been taken over by 40-year-old cat ladies. I recognize that my wife and daughter are teachers and they're part of that population, but that's the reality. 84% of elementary teachers and a little bit less, probably 80% in the secondary schools are female. So it has a female bent to it. And the ideal behavioral profile for a young student is that of a young girl, quiet, task-centered. Whereas what's seen as bad behavior is what little boys do: act out, rough and tumble play,
maniacs,
verbalize. Yeah, so it's like, okay, no wonder we have this education system that punishes young boys. There's a great book by I think her name is Christina Summers. It's called The War on Boys, and it describes how we have institutionalized this process. You go back to the establishment of the Department of Education in 1980. An utter failure for the nation. We should get rid of that thing right after we get rid of the ATF and the IRS. But
it sounds like you're advocating for maybe more funding for like JROTC and stuff in high school.
You could, yeah. I'd like to see that. I think that's one way. But I think it's more than just formal programs like JROTC. I think it's societal.
Yeah.
I think it is the abandonment of the traditional family. I'm a traditionalist. I'm a Catholic. I've been married 32 years. My kids are both normal, well-adjusted, producing citizens. That's my greatest accomplishment in life. It is not my Green Beret. It is not all the awards and badges. It's not the books. It is that I stayed married to the same woman, God bless her, and that I raised normal kids. So I count that as a great accomplishment. If we had more guys that saw that role as sort of a sacred role of raising good families, I think you'd solve all the problems there. I think that the education system is a part of that. Homeschooling is awesome. Private schooling. That's why I think school choice is such a critical issue, in that education is a non-competitive environment. We know what happens in non-competitive environments. When the government has a monopoly, you get the DMV. If you were to, everyone's been to the DMV. Nobody will ever claim that going to the DMV is a good experience.
It's a good
that
time.
It's efficient, effective, right? Because there's no competition. If Elon Musk got to open a DMV in every state, he'd put the DMV out of business because he'd make it efficient and effective. So I think it's multi-layered. It is the education system without a doubt. It is the traditional family system without a doubt. It is our over-reliance on pharmaceuticals. I've yet to see there are not many health issues that you can't solve with Whole Foods and a walk outside. Like, go for a walk and eat normal food. Eat what your grandparents ate. I mean, and again, that's a reflection of women being encouraged to be out of the home, right? If you go into work, if you're two working parents, now you have two people contributing to the tax base. Whereas, my wife was a stay-at-home mom until our kids were in fourth grade, I think, before she went back to work. And that's one of the reasons why my kids are normal, productive citizens, because they had a stay-at-home mom who took care of them, and dad occupied a traditional masculine role. And it was tough in the military. We all recognize that. You were deployed a lot, so my wife made many, many sacrifices. But I think if we saw a return to that, so it's multi-leveled, it's societal, it's institutional in nature. If we could incentivize it, we've seen this in other countries that will incentivize having stay-at-home moms and large families are countries that are thriving culturally, and we are not one of those countries. We are seeing an increase in divorce rates, an increase in fatherless homes. 80% or more of males in the prison system come from fatherless homes. I mean, it's an obvious correlation. So I think that's part of it, and the military will only benefit from that, because the military is one of the last places where traditional systems are still in place. Now we've seen an erosion of that with the lifting of the combat exclusion rule in 2012, where females were allowed and encouraged into non-traditional combat roles. And you can argue the benefits of that, and I've studied that deeply. I spent years studying female candidate integration into special forces. That's been by all accounts, by any measure, an utter failure. That's not to say that the 5 females that have made it through selection are failures. They are phenomenal people and operators by all accounts, although there's some debate on that. But they're mostly great soldiers and great Green Berets.
Is it failure because of physical ability, like broken hips? I mean, for those that don't know, the Marine Corps did a very extensive, they did an extensive study. I think they put together 3 different companies of Marines, and they were one that was all male, one that was all female, and then one that was like mixed. And then they had them do all kinds of different tasks. I mean, it was a pretty impressive study, and it found that the ones with half female or had females in them had a higher amount of injuries and also performed not as high as to a high of a level. And it's not their fault. Their body frames aren't built for like a Marine infantryman is out hiking.
It's biology.
Yeah,
it's biology.
Yeah, it's not.
So
there's no issue with that.
We saw this in special forces. So the like I said, the normal selection rate is about historically 36%. The selection rate for females is 10%. So it's at least a third, if not a quarter. And of the females, the female candidates I don't like saying females, I like to say female candidates. It's a descriptor. Of the female candidates that didn't make it, over half suffered permanent musculoskeletal injuries to the point that they had to separate from the service.
Oh, wow.
Right? Now you will not find that statistic. SOCOM will not provide that. SWIC will not provide that. I discovered that through my own research. 50% have permanent musculoskeletal injuries that resulted in separation from service. So now let's look at it. Let's not look at it from a brotherhood, fraternity, male patriarchy. Let's look at it from a business case. Is it worth, from a business case, that 50%, at least 50% of the female candidates that we want to assess in the special forces, we will now be paying for their disability and treatment for the rest of their lives. Is that worth it from a business? Can we scale that up? Can we sustain that at a large scale? I don't think we would want to. So is it, so we say, well, females deserve all the good chances. That's what a compassionate society does. Is it compassionate to permanently disable for the sake of a social experiment? And I'm not saying it's a social experiment. I'm saying that's what the critics would say. I personally support it. I think there's room for it. But I think we have to be smart about how we do it. Because what we will get is 50% will be permanently injured. If we had a 50% permanent injury rate for anything else that we did, if half of the people that we sent to airborne school we permanently disabled, we would shut down airborne school overnight. They would be like, this is an utter failure. We have to change something. No, airborne insertion and joint forcible entry is no longer a viable tactic. We got to do something different, because that's unthinkable that we would do that. But that's what we're seeing in special forces. So now we have to say to ourselves, is that juice worth the squeeze? We've gotten some phenomenal female special operators out of it, but did we have to have all that squeeze for that little bit of juice? Is that really worth it? Or is there a different model that we can use? Maybe it's a model like the special mission units do. Special mission units have had female operators for decades. They have a different assessment process. They have a different employment model. They have a different training model. That's not to say that those female operators are any less. They're just different. Just like males and females are just different. To your point, it's just biology. It's not an indictment on the value of females. It's a recognition of biology. It's just different. You can leave your ethics and your morals and your ideologies out of it. You just have to look at it from that perspective. And in my mind, as a businessman, I look at that and I say it's absolutely not worth it. If every other time I went and put the trash out of my trash cans, I sustained a gunshot wound, I'd stop putting the trash out. So let's look at it. Let's look at it in a little more logical terms. So when people criticize Pete Hegseth, our declared SecDef nominee, and he has been very clear that he does not support females in a lot of those combat roles. And I don't know his full position. I'm probably butchering his full position, but I think that the discussion is a valid discussion. There is some merit in that discussion. Is what role? So I think pilots, that's probably a very valid case. I think in many cases, women are superior pilots. They have the ability to multitask that men don't. So maybe there's a strong case there. But for Green Berets, I don't know that there's the same merit in that argument. For the reasons for Marine Corps infantrymen, I don't think there's a lot of merit in that argument, just because the return on investment's not there, and the damage we do is too high. So somebody can make the case that it's not ideologically make a case to me that it's not ideologically based. That's logic and evidence, and I'm more than willing to have that discussion. But if it's ideologically based, I'm not interested. So in either direction.
Yeah, it's ongoing, right? It's an ongoing discussion. I mean, even when I was getting out, or a couple years before I got out, I remember we got our first female officer at my artillery battalion. And, or she might have been from regiment and she came down to the battalion for something. I don't remember, but I was like, wow, there's a female. And dude, not even literally the first day, someone wrote a joke on the whiteboard about a dick. And she walked in and he went to erase it real fast. And then he realized that he wrote it with permanent marker. And he was trying to erase this board. And I'm like, God, day one,
but
man.
Listen, you have to recognize that one of the things that makes those combat units so effective is that masculine mentality. It may be against regulations. It may be in poor taste. It may be colored. But that's the stuff that makes those dudes tick. Yeah. And if you remove that, so I did a study this is 2013. It was right after the lifting of the combat exclusion rule. And we went down and surveyed one of the brigades in the 82nd that was the first, it was designated as the first unit to accept female infantrymen into it. And we went down and talked to and interviewed the entire, from the brigade commander down to the lowest private, and we surveyed them all, and we asked them, and they, to a man, said, we don't have no one's here is like we're not no one, but it is not the prevailing attitude that we don't want women here. It's that we have very strong concerns that that standards will be lowered. So as long as you don't lower the standards, we're fine. Nobody cares. That was number one. And the second thing is we have a very strong concern that our default position is dick jokes on the whiteboard, right? You sit around with any group of ground pounders, and the conversation will turn to shit jokes and jerking off within minutes, right? That's the reality of it. And so now you introduce a female into this traditional masculine environment, and because that's the default culture, somebody's going to say something and they're going to catch a charge. They're going to catch a sharp charge, an EO complaint or something. And for right or for wrong, that was the number one concern of those guys, is we are concerned that we're going to see an increase in guys getting catching charges, being persecuted for that. And their concern was not so much that they couldn't change their behavior. It's that they knew these young guys, these young infantrymen, these are like the salt of the earth, corn-fed guys from Nebraska. And they were like, we can change our behavior, but what we're concerned with, and they had the data that when organizations increase the education of EO and sharp complaints, you see a rise in fake, false complaints. This is well documented. Nobody in the DEI community wants to talk about this. This is well documented. You see an increase in both legit, but a marked correlated increase in false charges and complaints. And these guys are like we can change our behavior, but like I'm in the room and a protected person comes in and now I'm simply in the room, I'm going to get implicated in a false charge. And so they were legitimately scared about this. And they were just like, so, I don't care as long as standards aren't lowered. But I'm worried about this environment of false charges, because you know as well as I do that nobody tolerates legitimate sexual harassment. If for male on female, female on male, male on male, whatever, nobody tolerates that stuff. Nobody tolerates racism. Nobody tolerates sexism. Nobody tolerates that EO stuff. It is simply not tolerated. But we also know that no matter what, if you are accused in any of those cases, you are guilty until proven innocent. That has destroyed many a career of an innocent person. So in an organization, in cultures where we don't tolerate that, you're at risk for false accusations. Mm-hmm. And it will kill a career. We've all seen it. We've all seen good guys get hemmed up.
Yeah, it can definitely happen. And I remember, when I first came in the Marines, for those that listen to the show, I wasn't a forward observer, fire support man right out of MOS school. I was a mechanic. I came in open contract, and I was with Marine Logistics Group 2, MLG, 2nd MLG. And I was a mechanic there and had females in our unit and stuff like that. And the thing is like, hey man, there's going to be relationships in a unit that has males and females. You're not going to stop it. 18 to 22 year olds that are in some of the best shape of their life, that are around each other all day long. You think that's not going to happen? That's like the big problem that I see, is that guys start acting goofy around a girl, you know what I'm saying? Or a woman. And that's a huge issue. And then the other big thing for me that I've always thought was a problem was that, like, the female, so now they have, like, if a female wants to join the infantry, if a woman wants to join the infantry, I'm so bad about just saying female from being in the military.
Yeah, that's the military's default position.
Yeah, so if a woman wants to join the infantry, she has to pass a skills-based physical fitness test for the infantry. So they have set it up so that there's here's the minimum standard for both males and females to pass this to even get into the MOS, which I think is great. I think that's good that there's like, hey, here's the bottom line. You have to be able to do these things to even come into this field. But I think a problem still arises that women in the military have a different PFT or physical fitness score requirement for different scoring. So for men, it's like, hey, if I want to get 100 points for my pull-up test, I have to do 22 pull-ups. Women, I think, have to do 5. which is a huge discrepancy. But if she does 5 pull-ups, now her promotion score is higher than yours. You know what I'm saying? And I think until that changes, where you're watching people that are literally physically weaker than you get promoted faster than you because they technically scored higher on a physical fitness test, I think that right there by itself injects so many problems, because you can't say that we're the same and that we can do the same and that we should be treated the same, while at the same time you're technically getting promoted in an advanced fashion because your annual physical fitness test scores are lower to get the maximum points. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So 100%. And we addressed that in Special Forces. This is interesting. About 2016, we adopted the gender neutral PT test. And everyone was like, oh, the gender neutral, that means that they're giving females a pass. But what they didn't realize is what we did was we said, every candidate will meet the male standard. There's one standard, and the standard they adopted was the existing male standard. So it actually made it created the level playing field. It addressed the exact problem that those young guys in that infantry brigade said, is as long as you don't lower the standards. They said, we recognize that we're not going to lower standards. There's going to be one standard, and it's going to be the male standard. So, but from the force, guys heard, oh, gender neutral standard. That means they lowered the standard. The reality was they made the standard much harder. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, so in the process of my research, when I was researching the female candidate integration in SFS, I personally interviewed about half of the female candidates that had attempted, both made it and had not made it. And those female candidates, particularly the unsuccessful ones, were the most adamant about do not lower standards. So these are women that were victims of the harder standard, and they to a woman said, do not lower. Nobody worth their salt wants to come through with lower standards.
It helps nobody. Because now when you show up and I know standards were lowered for you, I'm questioning if you're even capable. That's why these people that want to always like lean on race, sex, gender, whatever, religion, like as a qualifier, like quit telling me that they're qualified because, oh, this is the first Asian American man that ever did this. Who cares about all of that, those qualifications? Like when you tell me, hey, he did it, he completed this, and you don't have to say he's the first Asian or he's the first black or he's the first, or she's the first whatever, bi, trans, whatever. When you add that stuff, it's like diminishing it. It's like, okay, well, did you get it because you did what everyone else did, or is it because that qualifier somehow gave you a pass on some stuff? I know it's about merit. I know the Air Force has had some issues last year, or maybe earlier this year, with their special tactics squadron, and there was a female going through training that had been dropped and requested to drop multiple times, and I guess they let her come back into the training. It's because they wanted to graduate a female. They wanted someone, to finish that course, and they gave her way more opportunities than they would have the guys. A lot of the instructors came out and were speaking, passing that information. But I don't know. It's crazy. The whole situation is crazy. Like
it's challenging. So I'll make a couple comments on that. First, I'll say that when I did my evaluation of the Special Forces assessment selection, particularly in regards to female candidates and preferential treatment, I did not find any preferential treatment. There's some arguments to be made about they had extra opportunities or mentorship. I never saw any of that. Every female candidate that I saw was treated exactly like the males. The system is designed that way. The cadre were incredibly professional, level playing field. That we did see it with other candidates. Other candidates would give preferential treatment to females, to female candidates, but that's not something that you can really control per se.
Isn't that a peek into the issue though? That they're even from their own team, they're getting preferential treatment. It's
so you made a point earlier. It's about human nature. Yeah. These are population level tendencies. Yeah. It's meritocracy. So let's talk about that. Let's unpack that a little bit. America, for all of its foibles, is a meritocracy. If you do well, you shall be rewarded. That is the premise of the American dream.
For sure.
So we all love that. We love the fact that if I work hard enough, I'll get there. It doesn't always work out. We get it. There's issues with that. But that is the zeitgeist of the American psyche.
Yep.
We love a meritocracy. So when we see things that are counter to that, like DEI, that's why DEI is under such attack. It feels un-American. So I would personally witness audit assessment selection, preferential treatment by males. I'll give you an example. So there is a time during team week. Team week is the last week of selection. It's universally recognized as the hardest week in selection. It's very physical, incredibly demanding, will blow your mind. There was a point in time between events where if candidates didn't make the time hack, they would get additional training. They get punished, right? And one of the punishments would be, you got to do extra push-ups or whatever. One of the punishments was they had to take their rucksack, their fully laden, it's about 70-pound rucksack, and hold it up over their heads and lock their arms out. And they'd have to hold it there for 30 seconds. And the whole team would do it together. The entire team, you missed your time, you're going to get punished. Everyone hold their rucks up over their head, lock your arms out. The time will start when everyone has their arms locked out, and will only be finished if everybody makes it. Well, females on a population level have less upper body strength than males. This is non-disputable. This is a scientific fact. So, of course, even amongst the most physically fit, the people that go to SFAS, you are going to see that population level difference. It'll be less pronounced because these are naturally hyper-fit people, but you would see that. And female candidates would often struggle with that particular punishment. And the male candidates would physically rally around her. And with their rucks locked out, they would be nudging her ruck up with theirs, like physically holding it up. And I witnessed this multiple times. And so you'd say, well, they're just helping a weaker candidate. But we also witnessed on those same teams at the exact same time, if there was a weaker male candidate who also could not lock his arms out, the other candidates would literally turn their backs to him and rally around the female. They would turn their back on the male that was struggling on the exact same thing that the female was.
Try harder, pussy.
So we noticed it. We saw it so often, and it was so pronounced that myself and my interns, we made these notes, and we go back and share. Did you notice this? We're like, yeah, oh my God, I did see that. So this is a phenomenological study. That was a phenomena that we noticed. And then when selection was over, I'd write down the roster numbers of the candidates that I saw engaging in this behavior. Selection's over. They're out from under the yoke. They're done. They've made it. And I would interview them, and I would say, "Hey, tell me about this time." And I would describe this to them, and they would say, "I never did that." I'd be like, "Well, what?" Like, no, I saw you. Like, I saw you. He saw you. She saw you. Like, we all saw you. Here's what happened. I'd be like, describe it, pictures of it, and they'd be like, I have no recollection. They would literally not recognize that they exhibited that behavior because, to your point, that is human nature. It just is. Female candidates have less upper body strength. Female candidate bone density and bone structure is different than males. Not all females and not all males, but as a population, this is the reality of it. And these male candidates were this behavior, this protecting females, helping females, is so ingrained. It is such a powerful element of human nature that they would not even recognize that they were doing it. Okay, so now let's expand that out, and let's take that. So people will say, okay, well, we can manipulate a training environment, whether it's at SFAS or it's at one of those 3 Marine battalions that did the test. We can manipulate that, and we can control the outcomes. Okay, but can you also do that on the battlefield when they're out of training and now they're under the chaos of combat? And under that chaos of combat is when you return to your most base instincts. And if your base instinct is to always, as a male, to protect the female in the tribe, then how are you going to control that under combat? Mm-hmm. Is it going to affect the combat effectiveness of that unit? I'm not saying it is, but is it? That's something worthy of research. And the problem is, though, is that in conducting that research, the the risk, the outcome is potentially catastrophic. People will die during the conduct of that experiment. So we have to really think cautiously, but I think very hard and be very cautious about how we apply these policies. Policy matters. That's a big deal. Like we should be thinking about that. And what I gather from Pete Hegseth, let's go back to the guy that will make policy, the Secretary of Defense. I think what he is saying is we need to examine this. Like I fundamentally, because I'm a traditional guy, it doesn't sit right with me. I want to examine that. Maybe that's not what he's saying. Maybe he's saying no chicks in the military. Maybe that's his thing. I don't think it is. But every reasonable person that I've talked to, from the 4-star level down to the E1, will say the same things. I don't want the standards to be lowered. I don't know how the unit's going to respond. I don't know how this is going to react in situations. I want to know more. That's what they're saying. We have to study it before we make any decisions, before we change policy. Let's just examine it a little bit closer. And I think that's a completely reasonable position to have. That's what smart, good leaders should do.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's an interesting, it's an interesting thing. We'll see what happens. I think Pete Hegseth has said, he's like, hey, listen, I know women are in combat. It's duh. We've had the global war on terror for the last 20 years. Yes, there's women in combat, but there's no reason to put them in the front lines. There's no reason that we have to, stick them in the infantry and the artillery and stuff like that. Like if they would much rather it be they happen to come into combat situations rather than they're being told that they're going in. You know what I'm saying? I guess like it's like a truck driver, gets in a kind of ambush situation. Either way.
But I know quite a few special operators that are tip of the spear that are female. They're good, but they're not. They are atypically female. They're like dudes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just like I know lots of dudes that tried to be operators, and they were atypically male. They had a lot of feminine characteristics and qualities. They didn't make it. The by and large, the females that make it through have atypical female personality traits, personality and physical traits. Like they're like you can't tell me. So take your average CrossFit champion. Let's look at CrossFit. Take your average female CrossFit champion and look at her and tell me that is a typical female. They look like a dude.
Yeah.
They are jacked, yoked, and they do not look hyper feminine. I'm not saying they're unattractive or they're ugly or they look like dudes, but they do not look typically feminine, because that's what it takes to be hyper competitive in that environment. So why is that not true in the military? Why do we say, oh no, you got pigtails and pink for everything? Man, I think there's a more reasonable position to take there, and I just think it should be studied before we change policy and adopt these, because the results of this changed policy can be catastrophic, and nobody wants that.
No, I think you're right. And even before all the push to add females into combat arms, like you said, special mission units were already utilizing females for specific roles. Like, hey, we have this mission that we need. You are best fit for this. Be it it's an undercover thing that they need a female. Be it they need a female there to do searches that men can't do, or whatever it is, or they have some kind of specialty. I mean, I don't see there's anything wrong with that. I don't know. It's just it's a big game to me. At the bare minimum, I think that even if you have a fitness test to get into your MOS, I think the annual physical fitness test for all the services should be a flat rate across the board. And because it's not fair for guys that are having to work extremely hard to max out on their physical fitness test. You're talking 18-minute 3-mile for males. To get a top score, you have to hit 18 minutes or less on your 3-mile run. And for females, it's over 20 minutes, and it's just like, that's a highly different level of fitness. And I just don't see it being, I think there's always going to be questions in the general services of the military until everyone is the same. Like, why? Oh, she got promoted to corporal, or she got promoted to sergeant because she only has to do 10 pull-ups or 5 pull-ups or whatever it is. And if I would have gotten that same score, then I would never, it's like you can look at it and go, listen, I would have gotten promoted had I was taking the same physical fitness test as her. I think that is at a very minimum.
I think you have to remove the emotion. You have to remove the ideology from it. It has to be logic and evidence.
Yeah.
And for 97% of the population, they hear your argument and they say, that's logical. Now show me the evidence. And so if the evidence is, let's do the research. And if your policy says you shall not do the research, because I think most people know where that research shall conclude, then we say, okay, then I'm out. Then that's not a meritocracy. I'm not interested in being involved in that. So this is where you get lower recruiting. Now, so take that same human nature and take it across the population.
Yeah.
And this is what the result is. You get guys that say, I don't want to be involved in that.
Well, let's talk about something a little lighter.
Let's do it.
We talked about recruiting, and we talked about how like social media presence can be a huge thing for recruiting. I talked about those two Instagram pages like Goons Up and Heavily Suppressed, which are both really good for infantry and artillery.
Both, I love them.
Yeah, and if you look at what those kind of pages are doing, it seems like a big positive. I know you got to have heard this stuff with Tim Kennedy and his page and stuff like that. You're a Green Beret. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, there was a podcast that came out called the Anti-Hero Podcast. Their MO is kind of like, well, one, Brent, one of the main hosts, is a former Delta guy. So it's not like these are some random guys that are, talking shit. But they come out and they go, hey, a lot of these military influencers are inflating what they've done in the military to sell their brand, to sell their product, whatever it is. And so their whole thing is that they're calling people out for BSing. And one of those is Tim Kennedy, who's the most recent one and went super viral, about everyone talking about how his book that he wrote, they go through one chapter or maybe two chapters of the book during one episode and kind of go, this is bullshit. He doesn't know what he's talking about here. So as a Green Beret, as someone that's in that community, what is your take on, one, like the military influencers that are out there, and two, like, some of these guys are making Tim Kennedy's making millions of dollars off his brand deals and stuff like that. And two, like embellishment of service, or do you think, like, I don't know, what's the vibe in the Green Beret community?
Yeah, I'll give you my opinion, and I think it's probably pretty close to the vibe. But so first off, I don't know Tim Kennedy. I don't know anybody who knows him. I don't know anybody who's ever served with him. I don't follow him. I've never read his books. I've never listened to a podcast he's on. So I'm coming at this from a completely objective position. In that, first off, I think it's okay to not have an opinion on these things. Not everybody has to have a hot take on this.
Yeah,
stuff.
For sure.
I don't know him. What little I have heard from him, it happens to be in a thing that I'm an expert. I'm an expert in Special Forces assessment selection. And I have heard him discuss his experience at SFAS, and he cheated. He admits to running the roads during land nav. It's called a road runner or a roadkill. And I one of the things that I do is I teach guys land navigation, and I take great pains to explain to guys, do not cheat. And here are the skills that you need in order to not cheat. Mm-hmm. So in my soul, I take offense at the fact that he has cheated and he's a Green Beret. But I also recognize that a lot of guys do. I'm good friends with a senior officer who served at the highest command levels, including at Special Forces Assessment Selection. And he and I do not share that ideology. I'm of the mind that if you get caught cheating, fuck you, you're gone. He is of the mind that, like, no. I want guys that are willing to cheat, because that's what you got to do. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. That old mentality.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
So there's an argument to be made there, and so I also know. That's my starting position. I don't really have an opinion, but what little I do know about Tim Kennedy, I don't necessarily like. But I also. So I am a military influencer. I have literally 4,000 Instagram followers. So, I am not making $1 million a year from my brand deals. I talk about the most benign stuff possible. I talk about land navigation, rucking, boots, and socks. So, like, I'm talking about stuff that you could not possibly get upset about. And some of the shit that gets said about me, about what I'm doing and my role here. And I see myself as benign, if not benevolent. I get a rash of shit about that.
Really?
Oh, that guy's fucking cheating. He's telling guys how to cheat on the psych eval. I mean, if you read my work, that's absolutely not what I do. I go to great pains to do the opposite, to tell guys not to cheat, don't cheat. Here's how you can cheat. Here's the skills you need. Here's the knowledge, skills, and attributes you need to develop so you don't have to cheat. So if I, from my incredibly benign positions and my hot takes, if I can get a rash of shit, Tim Kennedy, who is speaking on much more emotionally charged stuff, he's talking about his experiences in combat, where it's naturally confused and muddled and charged. That's going to generate a response, and it's going to be correlated with the level of energy of the event. So, again, I've never read anything that he's written. I heard the story I heard is that he made a claim that he threw in one engagement 50 grenades. Yeah. Anybody who's been around, now I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's his claim.
That's
what I've heard.
That is his claim.
Okay, so you've carried grenades. I've carried grenades. You would struggle with 5 grenades, much less 50 grenades. 50 grenades would be a massive rucksack full of grenades. I don't think that's physically possible. Could it? I don't know. Maybe. I don't think so. So when I hear something like that, I'm like, okay, that's probably a little bit charged. That's probably an exaggerated war story. Yeah. But that's what war stories are. Okay, so my sort of take is that, so I use the war story as a literary device in my books. I literally have chapters called war stories. They're titled "No Shit, There I Was," and they are war stories that are designed to do what war stories do. They tell a tale. They make a point. They have a moral, a theme to it. But I also am very clear in that I follow the time-honored tradition of a war story. It must be at least 10% true at least 10% of the time. Man, that's a low threshold. That's a low barrier. So, but as soon as you publish it, now it must be reckoned with. So, I don't make any claims for things that are in my books as being 100% truthful. They are, for the most part. I change names and dates to protect the innocent, including myself. But so I recognize that that's a problem. But in the community, there is a natural backlash to that. Nobody likes the nail that sticks up is the nail that gets hammered. So if you're an influencer, your nail sticks up. I find that self-promotion. I'm like the opposite of self-promotion. I tell guys, don't do what I did. Listen to like my advice that I give aspiring candidates is evidence-based. It's not based on my opinion.
Yeah.
Like I will tell you when it's my opinion, but I'm looking at like peer-reviewed research. I'm looking at what is the data, what is the evidence to my point earlier about logic and evidence. I want to know what the evidence suggests and what logic tells me about that evidence. So those are the two fundamental elements of argumentation. So that's how I try to present it. If I give you my opinion, I will also make it clear this is my opinion. So I try to approach it from this evidence, fact-based narrative, and Tim Kennedy clearly hasn't done that. That's not his shtick. That's not his place. But I would argue that so he's going to get a bunch of pushback from the guys in the regiment, guys like me, who are less reasonable than I am, and I'm about as reasonable as you can come, and I'm a full-blown dickhead. So imagine the guys that are less reasonable, less reasonable than me. They're full-blown narcissistic pricks. Okay, so they're going to have an opinion. Surprise, surprise. Green Berets have opinions, and they are strong opinions. So he's going to catch a bunch of shit. But I would make the argument that Tim Kennedy has done far more good than his exaggerated war stories have done bad. That there are more guys that are in the military and in the Special Forces Regiment because they were introduced to it in some way, shape, or form through Tim Kennedy than guys that didn't. Okay, is that an excuse to exaggerate your war stories? No, but I recognize that it's a muddy environment. I'll just say that's that sort of hate is the reason why I don't tell guys do what I did. the stories where I am in the story. I am an observer of the events, and it's never about what I've done. I think like most guys, I don't think anything I've done is all that special. I recognize that I am a Green Beret. I did some special things, but I was just one of many. There are thousands of guys that did the same as me, and many more that did much, much more than me. So it's not about me. It's about the regiment. It's about the story. It's about the history, the culture, the lore, all that business. So when a guy like Tim makes himself the center of the story as opposed to being an observer of the story, you're going to catch some shit for that. So that's kind of my take on it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm disappointed that a guy would feel the need to embellish his stories, but I also am disappointed that guys would be so passionate about attacking him personally for that. I say take him to task, like he can have exaggerated the stories without being a horrible human being. He didn't murder babies. You know what I mean? Like let's put it in context here. He exaggerated some war stories. Call him to task. If you have a voice, if you have a podcast, get him on your podcast and call him out man to man. So I work with my day job, I work with a lot of retired special operators. And these are guys at tip of the spear guys. And the smartest of them will say, I will never stab you in the back. I will stab you in the chest. If I have a problem with you, I will come to you and I will direct it at you. And we're going to solve this problem man to man, face to face, and we're going to get this thing sorted out. And man, there's a lot of purity in that. That's how men behave. Bring back the duel, I always say. So, if the duel, if I could call you out and challenge you to a duel, we'd have a lot less guys writing exaggerated war stories, and we'd have a lot less guys calling guys out for writing exaggerated war stories. If a guy's fucked up, call him out.
Yeah.
But don't do it from the cheap seats. Call him on your show and say, "Here is my position. You come argue your position."
I will say they did offer that. The Anti-Hero podcast guys did say that. They're like, "Hey, Tim is completely invited to come in, sit down, and let's discuss this. And if he's like exaggerating, then just admit that you're exaggerating stuff." Because the problem becomes where if you are a kid off the streets and you're reading his book and you're seeing like one of the thing that stood out to me was when he was saying that they were using an AC-130 and smoked so many people that there was just a field full of bodies, and that they were trying to find heat signatures to do dead checks on guys. Like if they saw a warm spot in the field of bodies, that he would take a shot. I'm like, okay, that's a little ridiculous, dude.
First off, it takes that body a long time to get to the temperature difference, so you could even distinguish that. So that kind of stuff like that.
And it's on the verge of being a war crime. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so right. I see their point. They're like, hey, if anyone's gonna hold other special operators, accountable, then it should be us. And like I said, one of the hosts is a former Delta guy, former Green Beret and all that stuff. So it's like he's got the credentials to be someone that's questioning stuff. And they did offer for Tim Kennedy to come on the show and talk about it. But I see their point. They're like, look, not only are you exaggerating, one, you've done so much already. You're already a Green Beret. I think he was on a SIF. I think he did multiple deployments and stuff like that. It's like, dude, and this is for people across the military, because a lot of people get out and exaggerate stuff. It's like, whatever you did was good enough. There's always going to be someone that did more than you,
just serving as a cook is good enough.
Yeah, don't church it up. He's
got credentials.
It never ends well if you're churching up or lying about what you did while you're in. So that's one of their main points. And the second one, like I said, is that they don't want young guys that are coming in to think that this is what it's going to be about. Like, you're going to go through the mental toll of seeing a field full of bodies. And, it's like, the stuff is bad enough. You don't have to make the worst stuff even worse either. Because you make us almost look, they talk about, it makes us look like we're unhinged almost. You know what I'm saying?
Psychopath. Yeah.
So I see both sides. I didn't know.
I see it. I think there's merit in both arguments. Again, though, my sort of default position is always that's family business. Keep it, just because Tim took it out of the family and broadcast it, keep it in the family as long as you can. So make that invite, and maybe they did. I don't know that they did. Maybe they invited him and said, "Hey, line by line, here's where we have issues with the things that you said, and here's why we have issues. Exhaust all of those avenues first. Mm-hmm. And if then you still haven't reached the satisfactory conclusion, then go out. But again, if you're on a podcast, you got to get clicks, you got to get people. So you're gonna make a grand announcement, and you're gonna elevate your position. So it's both ways. This is one of the reasons why I don't have a podcast. This is one of the reasons why I choose as my medium writing. I write books, I write Reddit posts, I engage on Instagram, and I like to write because I can control that message. I can edit it before I send it. I send it when I want to. I take great risk coming on a podcast like this because I'm speaking off the cuff, and like I don't have a script here. I got some show notes, but I don't have a script. You know what I mean? So it's like I could say something out of cuff. I'm certain there's some things that I said today that my wife's probably in the other room taking down notes. Well, you jackass,
son of a bitch.
So you son of a bitch. So
and I don't send for those that may wonder. I don't send questions out or anything like that. You know,
we
like
do not.
This is all off the cuff.
There was no prep. Yeah. So you run some risk there, but there's also some authenticity there. I also try to be as authentic as possible in my writing. I like to tell the truth. I think guys can suss out bullshit very quickly. So authenticity is important to me. It's important to me as a man. Like that, I'm not going to tell you one thing. I don't lie. Like I don't lie. I will not lie. Now, if a cop pulls me over and asks me how fast I was going, that son of a bitch can lie.
You may not remember.
Yeah, that's right. I will miscite myself. But like, I don't lie. I don't accept it. But so writing is the medium that allows me to do that. So now I see that if Tim Kennedy has written in a book, now I see, okay, that's a problem because you control that. It's probably his sixth book or something like that too. So you're probably running out of material at a certain point. So, So I am of the mind that you should handle that stuff in-house. You should always tell the truth. And if you've lived the life of a special operator, if you've been in the military, you've seen some of the most absurd bullshit you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
That stuff is worthy of telling, right? Those are what war stories are for. So if you've been in combat, now you've got another level of stories. If you've been a Green Beret in combat and you had a career in the UFC, you've probably seen shit that is bizarre as could get. That stuff should keep you in stories for forever and ever. So to exaggerate and to outright lie, 50 grenades, like that, so it starts to get absurd at that point. I recognize there's some merit in their argument against that. So again, they're legit guys. Guy's been in Delta for a while, probably has a leg to stand on. So I recognize all that, but I also recognize that it is completely acceptable to not have an opinion on that stuff. And because this is sort of my point, because I'm not well informed on it, I haven't read the book. I will not make a statement about Pete Hegseth and his positions. I caveated all that with, I don't know that's what he's saying. Yeah. So I want to be careful about that stuff because I don't have opinions on 99%.
More people need to be like that. Be honest. Be like, hey,
we'd be better off.
I'm just right? not. This isn't in my wheelhouse. I got life going on. I can't keep up.
But to that point though, there are things that I am incredibly well informed on, like Special Forces assessment and selection. I am a literal expert on that. So I'm going to have very strong, well-supported arguments about SFAS. But like guys will ask me questions about recruiting and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a recruiting guy. I'm an SFAS guy. Guys will ask me questions about the qualification course. I'm like, well, this is what I hear, but understand that's not my wheelhouse. So it's a perfectly acceptable position to say, I don't know, but tell me what your position is. Like let's have a conversation about that. And maybe eventually I'll become informed enough to have a strong opinion on it. But that's my opinion on Tim Kennedy. What little I do know, I don't like what I've heard, but I also recognize that stuff gets exaggerated about what you say because I've been a victim of it myself. Guys, the shit guys say about me is so far from accurate that you can't even see accuracy.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sure there's stuff about me out there that's probably not good. And, too, like when you create media, I remember one time I got interviewed, the Marine Corps Times reached out to me to discuss something about, I don't remember what it was. I think it was something with, I don't know if it was something with the artillery community. And I told the guy, I was like, yeah, I'm more of a forward observer, not really a Canon guy. You know, they have a different lifestyle, kind of explained what I saw their lifestyle as Canon guys from the outside looking in. And he like completely took what I told him and wrote like that. It was just crazy. Like what he wrote, it was like something I would never have said, and said that I was like, maybe I was on fighting with him on the gun line or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but I remember reading it and being like, what the I was all super pumped. I was like, this is the first time anybody's ever asked for a quote for an article. And I gave a quote and it was fucked up.
You will never mistrust the media. You trust the media until they write a story about you.
Yeah.
Or that you're cited. Because then you'll be like, that's not at all what I said. Like, I didn't do that. I never said that. They that's because that's the game. And it's like, so that's why the new media podcast, like I cannot deny what I have said on this interview right here. Mm-hmm. You cannot deny what you said. And because you didn't prepare me with questions and I didn't have prepared answers, you're going to get the rawest truth. And that authenticity is what people love. And we saw that in the last election. The podcasts, the social media as the new media is going to be the norm, because that's how you get the truth. You can't manage narrative when it's just the truth. The truth becomes the narrative. Mm-hmm. And so new media podcasts are going to be the future. And the citizen reporter, guys like me who are the expert. I am not, when I write my books, I don't have a ghostwriter. I'm the guy writing them. Because I self-publish, I don't have an editor. My editor is my wife. I don't have a publishing house that I have to answer to. I don't have sponsors that I have to bend the knee to. What you get in my books is the raw, honest truth. The downside is that you get spelling errors because I'm a horrible speller, right? so you get, but in that rawness, in that authenticity is real value. Yeah. Podcasts are a reflection of that. You know, the what you get on this podcast is very different than what you get on an evening show. You know, on the Jimmy Kimmel show. That's produced to within an inch of its life. What this is you hitting record, you calling me, hitting record, and let's go. Yeah. And so there's real value in that, and I think that's the future. And the cool thing is that there are podcasts like this. Whatever your thing is, for whatever your passion is, there's a weirdo out there who is writing books and has a podcast on it and is willing to tell you about their experience and is willing to answer those tough questions and tell you all about the weirdness. It doesn't have to go through the filter of a guy that will interview you and screw up that whole thing that you told him. It's just you telling it. And there's tremendous value in that. Guys love that process. So this is the future right here, man. Yeah, I love it, man. And it gives you like I can ask you a question if it was on like the news or like a 30-minute show on legacy media, you're going to get a minute or two of a snippet for the question. Your answer is going to be like a small snippet. And whereas this, I can ask you a question. Yeah, and it's like a lot of times it's, hey, what's going to capture headlines? I'm going to say the most crazy thing because it's going to capture a headline, and that's what's going to get pulled as a snippet to get put online. Something like this allows me to ask you a question and for you to kind of consider it and us to discuss back and forth and talk in depth about the nuances. I just struggle with the answer. I was not prepared. And I always say this, guys say, what's the best podcast you've done? I say, I love Former Action Guys because he's going to ask you a question that you weren't prepared for. And in that, as I wrestle with that, I mean, I'm over here stumbling and fumbling through that. Like I'm reckoning with like, how do I feel about Tim Kennedy? Like, I don't know. I'm literally talking through my thought process. Yeah. Guys hear that and go, oh yeah, that's pretty good. There's some value there. Yeah, for sure. Well, I've enjoyed it, man. I really have you coming on. It's been this is your second time on, if I remember correctly. Second, right? Yeah. I'm a repeat offender, man. I have your book up on the bookshelf, but you said you have a new one coming out. Where can people find that? We do, yeah. So I got 3 books out. So Ruck Up or Shut Up is the descriptive guide to Special Forces Assessment and Selection. About a year ago, we came out with the follow-up to that called Shut Up and Ruck. And this is a prescriptive guide for a daily performance journal. What to do every single day. Open the page, tells you how many push-ups to do, how many pull-ups to do. I worked with a group of experts, strength and conditioning coaches. My endurance coach is a fellow Green Beret, Dave Sue. He's former commander of the dive school down in Key West. he is the lead endurance guy at Coronado for the SEALs. So the SEALs, he is so good that the SEALs had to hire a Green Beret to come teach them about endurance. So that book is out, and then right here in my hands is the next book. This is called Never Get Lost, and it is a land navigation book, a book about a Green Beret's Guide to Land Navigation. That book is completed. It is at the publishers. We're just waiting on the cover art. That'll be out by Christmas.
Nice.
That next book will be there, and then in the next year we have several more books. Again, my medium is writing, so I write. So we have several more books. We have a Ranger manual, or Ranger handbook version coming out. We have a book for civilian rucking coming out, and so I'm surrounding myself with experts, and it's going to be in my voice, and that's all coming out. And when those books come back out, I'll come back on the podcast and give you more bad opinions.
Yeah, definitely, man. And that's all. Task Force Voodoo is your website, right? TaskForceVoodoo.com.
Yeah, TF Voodoo is the website. You can read the first chapter from each book there for free. And then the books are all available on Amazon.
That's awesome, man. Well, I've enjoyed, like I said, I've enjoyed the conversation. I've got your first book that we talked about when you first came on. If people haven't, check out that episode, go back. And we talk more about your career. And now this episode was more kind of general information, kind of current events and stuff like that. And that one is more career focused, gets a little bit more in depth of your journey through. And if people want to check out my stuff, it's jcramergraphics.com. My Instagram is Former Action News and Former Action Guys, both of those. I am on Reddit. I barely bring it up. I am on Reddit. There is a Former Action Guys podcast subreddit. I think there's like 12 members on it. It's like I do post all the videos and stuff there, or links to the videos there, so that people know that they're coming out, but it's not my most popular page. So Reddit's one of those things I do work on. And you're TF Voodoo on Reddit, correct? TF
Voodoo on Reddit. Yeah, I'm in the mainstay in the Green Berets and Special Forces subreddit. So you want to go there and get my hot take, there's a great way to reach out to me. And I'm on Instagram as TF Voodoo as well.
Check out all that stuff, and that's it, man. I really appreciate the interview.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Merry Christmas.
Hey, you too.